Well, welcome to Straight from the Source with Hayley Watts. And today we have Monica Rossman, Glenn County Supervisor for District 2, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so Orland is the big city in District 2, right?
Well, yes.
The big little city.
The big little city. I'm from a one Taco Bell town. We are amazing.
I love
The
that you
best
say
county.
that, but I mean, one Taco Bell is enough, right? As long
Oh,
as
100%.
That's my favorite fast food restaurant growing up.
See, mine is McDonald's, and we just got it.
Oh.
And the minute that we got McDonald's, it was like everybody, you had to wait like 3 weeks in order to get in.
I remember that was a huge story.
It was ginormous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but no, Glenn County is the best county. I don't care what anybody says, but Orland is amazing, and I've lived there my whole life.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a third-generation beautician, so there's not a whole lot that goes on that I don't know about.
How many people live in Glenn County in general, or Orland?
About 28 and change.
Okay.
Yeah, for Glenn County.
Like, you and I were talking about this. You pretty much know just about everyone.
Absolutely, and I'm related to almost half of them. So our family reunions, it's very interesting.
So there have to be pros and cons with that, right? That small town vibe. No, you can't get away with anything.
No, whenever I was younger, it was awful. My mom
Yeah.
knew everything. She was a beautician, and like I said, third generation. So I would get pulled over, and she would know it before they even ran my plates.
Right.
You know, she was like, "Oh, Monica did it again." So.
Yeah, how does that work with local law enforcement? Like, if you know the CHP officer or the deputy who pulls you over,
Right.
are you really going to take that person seriously if they're your friend?
They usually lean up against the car and they'll be like, you have two choices. We either give you a ticket or we call your mom, or worst case scenario,
This
we
is
take
when
you
you're
to
a
jail.
kid, right? They're not calling your mom
no,
now.
No, not now, no. Although they probably
They
would.
might.
They might. But yeah, so that was, so whenever I decided to run for supervisor, it was because of the love that I have so much for our county.
Yeah.
And that was definitely on the forefront. And you got to remember, Glenn County is, 25% senior citizen. And when you're a
Really?
beautician and you have a clientele that is mostly senior citizen, you start hearing of their needs and, the sad stories and what they are missing out on. That's whenever you decide to put your hat in the ring and think, you know what, I can help.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think about this a lot, right? So many of us, our go-to thing is to hear about problems and then we get upset and then we complain and we feel angry, right? But then we feel helpless. And I guess, how I try to live my life is look at it like, well, can I take action and do something about it? If not, I need to just accept and let it go. But if there is an action step, hey, let's do it. However, committing to running for county supervisor, that's a huge time commitment. What made you finally just say, you know what, I've got to do this?
So whenever you email me, I decided to send you my whys.
Yeah.
And the reason why is, as I said, my clientele, my nearest and dearest client was Thelma King. She was 104 years old. And when I decided to run, she said, I want you to answer one question for me. And I said, what's that? And she goes, what's this incentive of getting old? And I went, to eat cake every day and to, not worry about anything. And she's like, I'm lonely. I'm lonely and, and it's tough. And so I started really opening my ears and my heart to a lot of my clientele. And then when you start hearing them say, I'm missing out on this, I don't get to go here, I don't have my driver's license. If they don't have caretakers to bring them their supplies and their medications and their food, how are they going to get it? How are they going to, and like I said, living in Orland, we are in a position right now to where we are nearing a gray tsunami, which is the baby boomers are coming and everybody's retiring out and they may not have family that can take care of them.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about that and I thought, oh my gosh. And then I decided I got to thinking, and mind you, I'm not good at the politics thing. So I started thinking, well, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And I decided to do a senior expo in Glenn County, first one ever. We had over 800 people attend, over the age of 55. Of those, 120 of them were veterans that have never received benefits.
Wow.
And so,
How's that possible?
Absolutely. Well, because we are in a social media, internet time right now, to where everything that you have to access is on the internet.
Right.
Well, it took me a half an hour to teach my mom how to turn the flashlight off on her phone.
Yeah.
How am I expecting her to get, on this website to look something up? That's
Right,
ridiculous.
right.
So instead of having us come to them or them coming to us, we need to meet the senior citizens halfway.
Yeah.
So when that happened, I mean, when we had the Senior Expo, I only thought my mom and her 4 bowling friends were going to show up.
Right.
And come to find out, 800 people.
Yeah.
So that goes to show you the need that we have.
So how long have you been a supervisor?
So I'm going on my third, 2.5 years.
Okay, and this expo, it was in the past year, right? I remember.
Yes,
I think
we
covered
had it on here, yeah.
Yeah. So what actual tangible changes have you seen with this specific issue in terms of providing more care options for seniors? Is it something the county provides, or does the county just connect them with resources?
So we do have resources through the county, but the greatest thing, like this is my aha moment, was so we have a congregate for senior citizens to come and eat. Before the Senior Expo, we were having maybe 3 to 5 that would show up. Now we have anywhere up to 40.
Wow.
That are coming to eat. They didn't know that it was available.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that are reaching out and saying, you know, whenever I spoke to you, you said, you know, check on my parents' refrigerator. Check and make sure that all of their contacts are up to code. Make sure that, you know, and people are actually doing that.
Yeah.
You know, I keep telling them, check on your senior citizens, check on your neighbors.
Yeah.
You know, and really, you know, and it's amazing to see my daughter, who is 14, you know, she gravitates towards senior citizens and makes sure that they're okay, and that just makes a mama's heart happy.
I love that. I feel like that so often. I mean, I know that I was pretty selfish when I was a kid, and you think of adults are meant to provide for us, right? And then the older you get, you start thinking about your aging parents and like everything that my mom did for me. And my mom's so self-sufficient right now, and she's traveling the world, mostly retired. It's great, but you know, that's because she's in her beautiful, wonderful 60s still,
Yes.
and there will come a time where I'm hoping that I can just open up my home to her. But, you know, things happen. What if I'm not
100%.
around? What if there's nobody to care for her?
100%.
So it's cool to see local areas kind of opening some of those doors.
And another thing you got to remember is a generation. You know, my favorite line I like to say is, a hungry bird only gets fed when it opens its mouth. Senior citizens are very proud. Just like veterans, they're very proud. They're not going to come to you and say, I need this, until they need that and so much more, because it took them so long to build up the confidence and to swallow their pride to ask for help.
Yeah.
And so I don't want it to ever get like that.
Yeah.
Ever. I
Yeah.
don't want that.
Right.
So, and as a daughter who, you know, I lost my father to Alzheimer's dementia, and seeing the struggles, we were fortunate enough to where he had a daughter that knew how to use the internet and knew how to find resources, but there's so many out there that do not.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that we really need to connect with, and we have to talk to them.
Yeah.
And you have to open up that conversation. That's the hardest thing.
Right.
You know, they're not going to open it up. They're not going to,
Right.
you know, so you kind of, it's a little pulling teeth a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
You, some of those seniors potentially could still be at work to different degrees. And one of the things that you said, your whys, right, was also volunteer fire departments, right?
Yes.
And a lot of times that I notice that these are people who are older and probably already spent so much of their career in public safety, law enforcement, in, you know, professional as firefighters during their careers. Now they're giving more of their time, and yet it's still not enough, right?
No.
I mean, all across the county, how big of a problem is it in terms of fire protection?
It's very tough. You know, volunteerism has dropped. You know, people are so busy. I mean, you're a mom, I'm a mom. I mean, the hard thing is you know, you barely have time for, you know, a break or the nervous breakdown you deserve. You know, you like, you just hit the ground running and you just go. And volunteering is a huge thing. And in our town, we have the best volunteer department on the planet. I mean, we really, truly do. Not just saying, but, you know, my father was a volunteer for almost 20 years. My husband, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather, my cousin. So there's, you know, there's a lot of history in that. But you see it drop, and, you know, the young kids, they just, you know, they're just so busy. They just don't have time.
But see, to me, okay, I think that volunteering has so much value for so many reasons, not only for what it gives to the community, but what it gives back to yourself in terms of like a sense of self-worth and purpose and fulfillment. So I see the value in that, but it just seems like something as critical as fire protection
100%.
should be paid for, right?
100%. They shouldn't be going door to door asking for money for a ball, or you having to pay money for a pancake breakfast. And that is, whenever you give to those balls or those dinners or those lunches, you're really making a difference. No donation is too small.
Yeah.
And these gentlemen, one could be changing a tire at work and the fire pager goes off and he has to go and deal with a traffic accident or, doing CPR on somebody. And then they're supposed to shut it off, go back into their vehicle and go back to their work.
Right.
Or 2:00 in the morning. And that's just, to me, that is a hero. And our town is full of them. They are very strong and I consider them family.
So what needs to happen? I mean, is it possible for Orland or for Glenn County to find a way to support the fire departments and make it more, more paid people and give the volunteers a little bit more support?
Well, the good thing is we have the ambulance. We just had a 12-hour ambulance come on, and that has been helping out a lot with taking the pressure off of the volunteers. A lot of the calls are medicals, so that's been helping out tremendously. But whenever you have somebody come to your door, the million-dollar question is what do you do? Donate. Whether it be $5, $6, it doesn't matter. Do what you can to help out.
Yeah.
And there's I'm sure there's a simple answer, but right now it's just finding volunteers. It's just finding the bodies.
It's interesting because it's like the philosophy behind how our society is set up. I mean, it's in the hands of the people, right? And each community has its own set of values and how it wants to do things. And that's like a lot of times we'll see like Chico and Butte County recently passed different sales taxes to pay for things. And like I think actually they were both called Measure H, one for Chico and it was more for like roads and general fund stuff. And then Measure H in Butte County would pay for more fire services, libraries, sheriff's office. But then voters approved it, right? But I think that across a lot of our region, people just don't want another forced tax, right?
No.
And would you say that's kind of the case in Glenn County, where it's just like, hey, listen to the volunteers asking for help if you want fire protection, because nobody there's going to approve another tax.
Well, you got to remember too, look at where we live. We live in a very rural area. I always tell people whenever they ask about the fire department, I always say what my grandpa used to tell me is living so far out in the country, whenever you would call 911 if someone was breaking into your house, you didn't call in saying that you had a break-in. You called in a fully involved structure fire because there would be a volunteer that would get in their vehicle and get to the place as soon as they possibly could.
Right.
And these are people these are your neighbors, your brothers, your uncles, your cousins, whoever is on the department. And they're the ones that are always there, and living so far out, it's hard. Our sheriff's department is very spread thin, and it's very tough for them. And so it's just another level added to protection, and that's what you need. So it's not going to end until we see something happen, and what that is, I don't know. But I'm very honored. And I love every single one of them, just to be a part of it. That's what it is.
When I think of Glenn County in recent years, several years back when we didn't have rain for a while, it seemed like, I'm thinking of people with their wells drying up. We're seeing a big change though right now, right? Was it the city of Orland that just basically opened up water to some of the more rural properties?
Yes.
Like that's a big deal.
It's a very big deal, and thank goodness rain has come. I tell you what, thank goodness. But, and that's a good thing being in the position that we're at. We can see these stories, there's a lot of people that are saying, my well is good. I don't no longer need water delivered. There are a few that are still having water delivered to them, but it's just it's tough everywhere. It doesn't even matter where you are.
Did you ever read John Steinbeck, I think it was, East of Eden, where it talked about like the history of California and just this kind of drought is just part of California, right?
100%.
Like that it's just historically, it's something that we're so lucky that right now that we've had some great rainy seasons. I never call rain bad weather, right?
No.
But inevitably we will have periods of drought because that's just kind of the Mediterranean climate that we have. Like how do people, I don't know if you have a well on your property versus...
No, I live right in the...
You're linked in, but is that something that's like a main focus or fear for the community, or have people just kind of found ways to deal?
No, I think it's always been on the forefront, and it's whenever the wells started going dry, people were actually saying, "See, this is what we've been worried about."
Yeah.
And that's what's great about, having 5 supervisors is you have people that are very, they have their strong suits. Supervisor Carmen, when it comes to waters and wells and the drought, he is right in the forefront. He's
Yeah.
right there. We have Supervisor Withrow. He's with the farmers.
Yeah.
He is a farmer. He knows, he sympathizes with them, and he knows what they need.
Right.
Supervisor Tony Arent, he worked for the Forest Service for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that has to do with federal lands, he's your go-to. And then we
Yeah.
have Supervisor Yoder, who, whenever it comes to the laws and doing research and making sure that everything is, everything is understood on all parties, that's his strong suit.
Yeah.
So, I live right smack dab in town.
Yeah.
I don't even like camping. So, I mean, having to live out in the country, I wouldn't fare very well. I'd have 19,000 chickens and 10 cows and
Right.
not know what to do with them. But, so those are the gentlemen that, they come to us, and we can go to these conventions, and we learn, and we realize that every county, big or small, they
Yeah.
have the same exact problems.
Right.
It's just in a different amount of population.
Like with the water thing, and I can just go down like rabbit holes with this, but I hear things like, well, some of these growers, like we have our local ranchers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have certain capacities, and they can only drill so deep with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get these big growers who come in, and they've got these drills that can go so deep. And in some counties in the state, like the ground is like sinking because
Mm-hmm.
they're sucking so much groundwater up. Do we have any of those big companies like moving into Glenn County, or is it mostly like local guys?
It's mostly local guys.
Yeah.
It mostly is. And really, I mean, the hard thing about Orland is, you could hit a pocket and, it would be okay. And then within 2 inches of that, be nothing. And then, it's really tough whenever it comes
Yeah.
to the land.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I had one of my clients tell me one time, he says, I think Orland was called Orland because they started digging and they said, is this gravel or land? What is it?
Right, right.
But, yeah. So the water situation, I think that is just something that's going to be coming up.
Yeah.
We're going to be dealing with that for a very long time.
So again, like being from Orland, born and raised, it's just this beautiful, wonderful small town kind of vibe. Is there like any sort of sentiment in your community about like balancing, hey, let's be kind of progressive in terms of, we want the McDonald's, we want new stuff, we want to find ways to grow and improve? Or is there a lot of like traditional, like, hey, let's just preserve things and keep these sort of traditional values and keep things small and simple and kind of keep the outside world from coming in?
No, but I think it's called smart growth.
Okay.
There's a way that you can do it. And, you got to remember, we have kids, everyone has kids, and you want to keep a way for them to be able to have a place to work, and, be employed. And if they choose to raise their family, there's something for them to do. And that's what I love about our community is most of the decisions that are made are the smart decisions to keep them surrounded, and to keep everyone in the forefront, thinking about your kids, your family, your parents. And so I think that's, I've seen so many changes about Orland, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love the positiveness of it. Who would have thought that we would have had a McDonald's? When I was in high school, we used to have to drive to Corning to go get Taco Bell,
Right.
and now it's right there. We have a Dutch Brothers.
Right.
So it's just smart growth. I think that's what it is, and keeping everyone in mind, no matter the generation, just, whether the younger generation or older generation, they still have their places where they go get coffee every morning at, 5:30 in the morning. And then, they've already started their day, and by 9 o'clock, they're done with their day. And so then you got the younger ones coming in for breakfast. And,
Right.
So, and that's what I love about it. It's smart growth,
Yeah.
and I think you have to keep that in mind.
Okay, so you told me that you got on an airplane for the very first time just in this year.
So I flew the farthest by myself for the first time.
Okay.
I flew to DC, and it was not what I would have thought was great.
Like DC wasn't, or the plane ride?
The plane ride was horrible. I wanted to take the train, but it's like 84 hours,
Yeah.
and I was like, why don't I just do that? I
Yeah.
couldn't TikTok the whole time. It's fine. It was terrifying, and I
Yeah.
cried the whole time. Thank goodness that I have amazing people in my corner that, held my hand and promised me that, if we went down, I could land
Yeah,
on them.
yeah.
It was tough. It was very tough. This is the hard thing that they don't tell you about your position whenever you become a board of supervisor is the traveling and new adventures. You know, I had a 5-mile radius rule.
Right.
Like I never left Orland. Like if the very first words were, "Would you like to?" and the immediate, it's like, "No, I don't."
Yeah.
If you want to bring it to me, I'll look at it. But so this took me completely out of my comfort zone.
Right.
You know.
I mean, do you think that's a positive thing?
No.
No.
It's hard. I mean, I do it because I sit there and I think, you know, this is, in order to get my message out,
Right.
you have to go to the people. Nobody's going to come
Right.
to Orland and sit on my porch and be like, let me hear your problems,
Yeah.
you know. So you got to go out and you got to do it. And that was scary for me. You know, I took office, you know, 2.5 years, and that was tough.
Yeah.
You know, I had to go to LA, and I remember talking to my husband, I'm like, I've never flown without you. I've never been away from my family this long. And it was completely out of my comfort zone. And I mean, I had to pay $200 just to send my luggage because I was so overpacked. I didn't know what I was doing,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So there's a lot of firsts, and I feel that I'm prepared for it more. I'm not used to it, but I'm definitely prepared for it more. And it really shows what I'm willing to do to help out, you know,
Right.
and be the champion. Once I land, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's just getting to the airport and
Yeah.
navigating. I
Well,
mean,
and then with repetition, it gets easier, right? Like
They say that.
When I got married, my husband, I think, gosh, it might have been his first or second plane ride was with me to go meet my family, and he hated it in the
Oh, yeah.
beginning. But after I kind of just bullied him, I said, you know what, my family's in Southern California. If we're going to live in Chico, you're going to have to come visit with me. And now he's totally fine. It's just because the statistics, I think, would make it. They always say that you're more likely to get in a crash on the way to the airport than have the plane go down.
I don't.
But
The minute that our tickets were booked,
Yeah.
that's whenever the plane went down in DC.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
whenever all of these things started
there's
happening.
been weird stuff happening.
And my algorithm on my phone is
I
nothing but
hate it,
plane crashes. And
right?
so having to deal with that was
Yeah.
absolutely horrible and
Yeah.
terrifying. And no matter what anybody says, they said, "Oh, put earbuds in and you know,
Yeah.
you got to breathe." And I was like doing Lamaze the whole entire
Right.
time. I'm like, this isn't going to work for me. This is terrible. So,
Yeah.
but thank goodness my daughter does not have that fear. You know,
Yeah.
she's like, "Mom, you can do this." And the minute that I hear that, I'm like, okay, I got to be strong. I got to do this,
Well,
you know.
and that's the fear too. So if you don't like to travel, do you think your kids are going to stay in Orland?
She doesn't want to. She
Yeah.
wants to fly away, you
Yeah.
know. You can't have roots and wings. That's the tough thing.
Yeah.
And I'm really shooting for her having the wings. I want her to experience things and to have fun and to enjoy life. And sometimes, you know, I love the fact that she is so much opposite of me. She loves being out of her comfort zone, you know,
Yeah.
and she loves the problem solving and she's everything good of what I am not, I guess. Just I love that about her.
Well, I think a lot of times kids, when we're younger, we want to be like the opposite of our parents,
Oh, 100%.
right? And then once we get into our like 20s and 30s, we start to, all those values that our parents instilled in us, we realize that has kind of built us into who we are. And like now I look back and I was totally opposite from my parents at 16 and 25 even. And now it's like, oh my God, I'm exactly like my mom and dad. Just combination of both of their values. I mean, I am who I am because of what they gave to me and taught
yeah.
to me. So
And 100%. And you got to look at it as, you know, like my child, you know, she is very strong and super sweet. And, you know, I'd tell my mom something and she'd just start laughing at me.
Yeah.
And she's like, that's, you know, you were terrible.
Yeah.
You were absolutely horrible. And you never want to be the parent that you had until
Right.
you become a parent and you start hearing the words of your parents come out of your
my
mouth.
gosh,
And you're
yeah.
like, and you got to remember, I worked with my mom for 20 years. Like I said, third generation
Right.
beautician. I started in my career
Yeah.
working with her, and they always say, "Oh, you know, working with your family, you get luxuries, and you know, it must be so easy." No, it's worse. Like
Yeah.
their expectations are so much higher than if you know. Whenever you go to a stranger and get a job, they have no expectation of you. They just want you to do your job and be done.
Yeah.
You work for family, and it's like, no, no, that's not going to work. Go back. You know,
Yeah.
where you would have never gotten that. But I do hear my mother come out of my mouth
totally.
a lot. And it's, you know, I told my mom one time, I said, you know, she said this to me and she just starts laughing. I'm like, it's like having a a roommate that's broke all the time, and they expect you to have all this money to buy things, and she's like, you were awful.
Yeah.
You were the same way.
I know. I remember thinking that. It's like mom and dad are the money tree, and now being the money tree, it's like, it's either that or the flea meds for the dogs, or you get new sneakers. So, yeah.
And so you have boys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you have a girl, it's completely different. I mean, it's boys, they could be happy with, Hot Pockets and Xbox.
Yeah.
My daughter has, a nighttime routine of skincare
Right.
and hair and makeup. And, she tells me all the time, she's like, I use this lotion and this stuff on my face at night. And she's like, what do you use? I'm like, soap and water.
Oh.
Like, I don't,
That's funny. As a beautician, I would think that you would have this long list, and your skin and hair looks perfect. So I figure you've got a whole routine down.
No, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. Let me tell you, it really truly does. It's like a Monet. From far away, it looks really good. Up close, it's a complete disaster. But I'm myself, and my family is always, all the women in our family, we call it war paint, and we put it on,
funny.
and
Yeah.
it takes us a hot minute. That's another thing, being a supervisor. They like to leave so early to get to places.
Yeah.
So they say, oh, we'll come and pick you up at 5:45 to get to Sacramento at such and such time.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to wake up at 4 a.m. Like, this is just going to take forever, And they roll out of bed and they show up and they're like, oh, I slept so good. I'm like, I've been up half the night, thanks.
Right, right.
Why can't these things start at night,
Everybody's different. I'm a morning person, but staying up past 9, it's like, even if it's a concert I want to go to, it's like,
I know.
maybe I'll drink some coffee at like 3, I guess.
My girlfriend called me one time and she's like, hey, you want to go somewhere? And I'm like, it's 7:30. Like,
Yeah.
what do you, what is going on with you? Are you a teenager? We don't do
gosh.
that. I only have an hour till I get to go to bed.
Oh, man.
So, but that's the fun part. But I tell you what, this has been a wild ride, and I love every single person that I've come into contact with.
Yeah.
We really have the greatest county, and I keep saying it, from our CAO to our personnel director to, our supervisors. I would truly miss them if I had never met them.
So you have a really good team. You don't have a
my
lot of
gosh.
contention between the different
No.
districts, and no.
No, not at all. All 5 of us, I am the only female on the board. So I have to, sometimes I use my mom voice and it just comes out every once in a while, and I'm not mean to, it
Yeah.
just does. But they're amazing. They're whenever you get into this, you don't get elected because you know so much about budgets, or you know about water, or you know about this or that. You get elected because you know more about what your district needs. You should know more about, the needs of your people, especially, your fire department, your police department, if it's in your district, and that's the reason why you're up there. You have more in common with your constituents than anybody else. So when somebody comes to you and asks a question, you are elected to speak on their behalf.
Yeah.
Because you've gone and you've listened to the people. I try and get in front of people as much as I possibly can to say, what do you think about this? What about that? Like I said, I've been a beautician for so long that, I don't know.
Listening's what you do.
100%.
Yeah.
I know people.
I would say it's funny. My the hairdresser that I have now, Cammie, I met her when I first moved to Chico in 2016, and I used to do like tape-in hair extensions, and our appointments would take like 6 hours back in the day, and we just became, I would say, oh, she's one of my greatest friends, and we've never spent any time together outside of that chair.
100%.
But it's a special relationship that you have.
100%.
Yeah.
It's because it's safe.
Yeah.
When you sit in that chair, you are safe. It's only about you. I'm busy doing something where that's your time to vent. Not only do you pay for that time, but you've earned that time.
Yeah.
You've called and asked for that. Like I said, I've had, at my wedding, I had 3 of my mom's clients step in as a grandparent.
Yeah.
They've been involved. I've had them over for Easter, Christmas. If I find out that one of my clients is alone for Christmas, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're coming to my house.
Yeah.
We're going to be sitting around. People are going to be on the floor looking for a chair, but you're not going to be alone.
Right.
And the greatest people, I always say, I wish that you would have known such and such person. I wish you would have known, like Thelma King, 104 years old. I asked her one time, I said, what do you want to do? What's on your bucket list? And she goes, you know what I've always wanted to do? I said, what? She goes, ride a merry-go-round. And I went, you've never ridden a merry-go-round? And she goes, no, I've always wanted to do that. So I got a hold of a great person, Kathy Bartels, through the Glenn County Fairgrounds. And she said, yeah, it's almost fair time, bring her.
Yeah.
I contacted the fire department. They showed up to help me because I didn't know how I was going to get her on the horse in the first place.
Right.
They showed up. They rode the merry-go-round with her. Afterwards, she wanted to pet a cow. She became the grand marshal of the fair parade.
Oh, that's so cool.
So all these things happen just by saying, I've always wanted, or for us to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. That never would have happened. And I love that about her, you know?
Yeah.
It was great.
I love that. Monica, before I let you go, just looking ahead, looking forward here, is there anything that you're excited about or that's kind of that you've been hearing a lot from the community that you think that there needs to be some action taken on?
I'm so glad you asked that.
Oh, good.
Yes. So June 18th, we're going to be having our second annual Senior Expo. So I'm encouraging everybody to come out. We're going to have all different kinds of available options for people to receive services, you know, wraparound services. After that, we're going to be having a stand down in January for our veterans, which last time we had a tank. We had a Huey helicopter. It was a great opportunity for all the veterans to get together, and that was fantastic. Of course, our volunteer fire department, you know, if you have any questions, you know, Chief Cheney is always there to answer them. So those are my three go-tos. Those are my three loves, and I think when you start something, you should always have three things that you care about, and then work your way up.
Okay, well, Monica, thank you so much. It was
Thank you
such a
for
pleasure to
having
meet
me.
you and get
This
to
was a
know you.
blast.
Yeah.
Thank
all right.
you.
We'll see you next week.